State of Cannabis.
This is the State of Cannabis News Digest, a roundup of this week's key developments in the cannabis industry. Our top stories.
Illinois lawmakers have advanced a bill to prevent police from using the smell of raw cannabis as the only reason to stop or search a vehicle, citing civil rights and legal clarity. Louisiana's efforts to prepare for adult-use marijuana legalization hit a setback as lawmakers reject a proposed taxation framework. Massachusetts launches the Equity Works Career Hub, a new platform to help equity participants find jobs and training in the cannabis industry. The Missouri Supreme Court is deciding whether cities and counties can both impose a 3% tax on recreational marijuana, with wide-ranging implications for tax revenue and dispensary operations. Pennsylvania's push for recreational cannabis legalization has been delayed after the Senate rejected a state store-based proposal. Texas lawmakers approve a bill to modernize the state's medical marijuana program by increasing patient eligibility and access through regional dispensaries. Cannabis reform at the federal level remains stalled as the DEA leadership remains undecided on rescheduling, and Congress introduces new legislation to lift research bans.
Want to stay ahead of the smoke in America's evolving cannabis landscape? Subscribe to State of Cannabis, Weekly News Digest, your trusted source for fact-checked, nonpartisan cannabis reporting. Each week, we bring you the latest on federal reforms, state laws, industry shifts, and public health developments, all in one digestible episode. Whether you're a policymaker, patient, advocate, or entrepreneur, we've got the information you need to stay informed. Hit follow, give us a like or a thumbs up, drop a review or leave a comment. Share this episode with someone who cares about cannabis reform, because in this industry, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival.
And now here is the deeper look at the key events in the cannabis world this week.
Illinois is taking a critical step toward clarifying how police enforce cannabis laws during traffic stops. The House Judiciary Criminal Committee approved Senate Bill 42, which would make it illegal for officers to stop or search a vehicle solely based on the smell of raw cannabis. This comes after a series of conflicting state Supreme Court decisions and growing concerns about racial disparities in marijuana enforcement. The legislation, sponsored by Senator Rachel Ventura and championed in the House by Representative Curtis Tarver, seeks to bring consistency to how cannabis laws are applied, particularly in a state where possession is legal, but enforcement practices remain uneven. Lawmakers emphasize the need to balance public safety with civil rights and to ensure legal cannabis users are not unfairly targeted. Opposition to the bill remains, especially from those concerned about impaired driving. But similar reforms have already taken hold in states like Maryland and Minnesota, reflecting a broader national move to modernize cannabis-related policing. If passed, the bill could significantly affect both law enforcement operations and the experience of cannabis users on Illinois roads.
In Louisiana, a key piece of legislation aimed at preparing the state for eventual marijuana legalization has failed to advance. On May 13th, the House Ways and Means Committee narrowly voted down House Bill 636, introduced by Representative Edmund Jordan. The bill proposed a 15% excise tax on wholesale cannabis sales, not to legalize marijuana, but to establish a tax infrastructure in anticipation of future legalization. The proposed legislation would have generated substantial revenue of up to $228 million annually within 5 years, which could have been dedicated to boosting salaries for public school teachers and support staff. The tax would have applied to a wide range of cannabis categories and been administered by the state's Department of Revenue. Medical marijuana would have been exempt. The bill's defeat leaves Louisiana without a formal taxation plan should legalization occur. It also stalls broader reform momentum, which includes a related bill HB 627, proposing a pilot adult-use cannabis program. As neighboring states continue to legalize and regulate cannabis, Louisiana's delayed infrastructure planning could hinder its competitiveness and readiness in a future legal marketplace.
In Massachusetts, the state's Cannabis Control Commission is rolling out a new digital initiative aimed at expanding access to jobs in the state's growing cannabis industry. This week, the agency launched the Equity Works Career Hub, a first-of-its-kind online platform offering job listings, virtual interviews, and technical training to job seekers, with a particular focus on individuals from communities disproportionately affected by marijuana criminalization. Equity Works is currently available to members of the state's social equity program, with participants who have been directly impacted by the war on drugs, and will open to the public in June. More than 1,100 individuals have enrolled in the equity program so far, which also offers licensing fee waivers and priority access to delivery and social consumption business licenses. In addition to providing tools for job applicants, Equity Works allows cannabis businesses to host virtual booths, schedule live interviews, and highlight company culture. Officials say the platform is part of broader regulatory reforms, including expanded oversight over host community agreements and the removal of blanket employment bans on individuals with cannabis-related criminal records. With the legal cannabis industry in Massachusetts now valued at $8 billion annually, the launch of Equity Works signals the state's commitment to creating a more inclusive and sustainable economic future.
A significant legal question is now before the Missouri Supreme Court. Can both cities and counties charge a 3% tax on recreational marijuana sales, or must only one jurisdiction apply the levy? The case stems from a dispute involving a cannabis dispensary in the city of Florissant, which is currently subject to a total 6% local tax, with 3% from the city and another 3% from St. Louis County. The dispensary argues that Missouri's marijuana legalization amendment, which was passed in 2022, allows only one local government to impose that tax, depending on whether the dispensary is in an incorporated or unincorporated area. Counties disagree, saying the constitutional language permits overlapping taxation and reflects shared governance responsibilities, particularly in health enforcement. As the legal challenge plays out, millions in tax dollars remain unspent, and dispensaries face uncertainty about their financial obligations. Industry representatives warn that high tax rates risk pushing consumers back to the illicit market. With nearly 21% total tax in some Missouri cities, affordability is becoming a pressing concern. The court's decision will not only resolve this legal ambiguity, it could also reset how marijuana taxation is handled across the state, with ripple effects for businesses, consumers, and public programs funded by cannabis revenue.
The path to legal recreational marijuana in Pennsylvania has once again hit a roadblock. Just days after the House passed House Bill 1200, proposing that adult-use cannabis be sold through state-run stores, the Senate Law and Justice Committee rejected it in a 7-3 vote. While the defeat may appear partisan, the divide runs deeper than party lines. Key senators who support legalization, such as Republican Dan Laughlin and Democrat Lisa Boscola, opposed the bill on the grounds that the state-controlled sales model was not economically viable and did not support small businesses. Many lawmakers favor a private sector sales framework, similar to those in neighboring states. The disagreement reflects broader tension within Pennsylvania's approach to cannabis policy. The House, under Democratic control, has pushed aggressively for reform, backed by Governor Josh Shapiro's calls for legalization. However, the GOP-controlled Senate remains wary of federal conflict and the logistics of state-managed retail. Critics also question the speed with which the bill advanced through the House, suggesting it left little time for compromise. Public support for legalization is strong and growing, with polls showing that most Pennsylvanians favor allowing cannabis sales through private licensed retailers. But with no consensus on the model and the legislative session advancing, the future of recreational cannabis remains uncertain in the Commonwealth.
The cannabis world of laws, markets, medicine, and mindsets is changing fast. State of Cannabis Weekly News Digest is your anchor in the storm. Every week, we break down the top national stories in under 15 to 20 minutes, helping growers, patients, retailers, and reformers make sense of the shifting landscape. If we've helped you make better decisions, take a moment to like, follow, review, and share the podcast wherever you are consuming it. with someone who needs to hear the truth. This industry is growing, so let's grow smarter, together.
In a major development for medical marijuana access in Texas, the State House has passed House Bill 46, a bipartisan effort to overhaul the current compassionate use program. The measure adds numerous qualifying conditions, including chronic pain, traumatic brain injury, and Crohn's disease, and authorizes new delivery methods such as vapes, inhalers, and suppositories. It also increases the number of dispensaries allowed in the state from 3 to 11, with additional satellite locations to better serve rural communities. Veterans would receive expanded access regardless of diagnosis, and state health officials would be empowered to add conditions in the future. Lawmakers backing the bill say it addresses urgent gaps in access, particularly in underserved areas and among patients seeking alternatives to opioids. The cannabis industry also supports the changes, citing burdensome delivery logistics and competition from unregulated hemp products. While some critics remain wary of expanding cannabis access, the bill passed the House with broad support and now moves to the Senate for negotiation.
This week brought a mix of movement and inertia on the federal cannabis policy front. President Trump's nominee to lead the Drug Enforcement Administration, Terrence Cole, appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee but avoided giving clear answers on marijuana rescheduling. Senators pressed him on whether he supports reclassifying cannabis to Schedule III, a step recommended by the Department of Health and Human Services. Cole, who currently leads Virginia's Cannabis Control Authority, did not confirm if he agreed with that recommendation or how DEA enforcement might change. His silence has unsettled the cannabis industry. A move to Schedule III would reduce tax burdens and open doors to more research, but businesses remain stuck in a regulatory limbo without firm federal leadership. Meanwhile, there's fresh activity in Congress. Representatives Dina Titus and Ilhan Omar have introduced the Evidence-Based Drug Policy Act. The bill aims to repeal a Reagan-era restriction that bars the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy from advocating for the legalization of Schedule I drugs or funding research on them, unless those drugs are FDA approved. Lifting that restriction could allow federal experts to take a more active role in shaping modern marijuana policy. Though the bill wouldn't legalize cannabis directly, it could reshape the federal conversation and policy development, especially as public support for reform continues to grow. For now, however, both the industry and reform advocates must navigate a landscape defined more by uncertainty than progress.
In hemp-related news this week,
In Alabama, a contentious battle over hemp regulation has reached its conclusion, at least for now. Governor Kay Ivey on Wednesday signed HB 445 into law, a bill that imposes far-reaching restrictions on consumable hemp products. These include a ban on smokable hemp and THC vapes, caps on THC content in edibles, a ban on online and direct sales, and mandatory licensing through the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. The law has sparked fierce criticism from all sides. Small business owners say the law will devastate the industry and force closures. Medical users say the hemp market has provided vital relief, while the state's medical cannabis program remains non-functional due to court delays. Even conservative groups like the Alabama Policy Institute argue the bill either overreaches or doesn't go far enough. Despite the backlash and warnings about economic and healthcare consequences, the governor's office said only that the bill is now law. Legal challenges may follow, and with vague language around key issues like CBD and vape products, clarity may come only through court decisions or future amendments. For now, Alabama's hemp industry stands at a crossroads.
Meanwhile, in Florida, the state's hemp industry finds itself in a different kind of limbo, not due to sweeping new laws, but because lawmakers failed to pass any regulations at all. As Florida's 2025 legislative session wrapped up, efforts to regulate hemp-derived products like Delta-8, THC-infused edibles, and beverages collapsed under the weight of competing proposals. Two major bills, one from the Senate pushing for sales restrictions and bans on synthetic cannabinoids, and another from the House calling for a 15% excise tax, never made it to a compromise. The result: no new taxes, no new rules, and no clarity for a multi-billion-dollar sector that continues to operate without comprehensive oversight. Business owners say the absence of regulation spares them for now, from potentially crippling restrictions like those just signed into law in Alabama. But many also express concern about the long-term risks of operating in a legal gray area. Public health advocates, meanwhile, worry that products like Delta 8 and THC drinks remain accessible without proper safeguards. Industry experts point to rising tensions between the hemp and marijuana sectors, with added pressure from alcohol lobbyists pushing for stricter controls on THC beverages. The legislative stalemate also underscores growing national confusion as states struggle to balance safety, commerce, and innovation in the hemp marketplace. So, while Alabama's industry braces for a hard regulatory reset, Florida's is left waiting, uncertain.
Thanks for tuning in to State of Cannabis, your weekly cannabis news digest. If you found today's episode useful, follow us, give us a like, leave a review or a comment, and share the podcast with someone who needs to hear it. We'll be back next week with more cannabis news broken down and bias-free.